Why Domino's couldn't conquer Italy. Imagine a fairly extreme act of boldness, selling pizza to the country that invented the dish itself. This isn't a hypothetical scenario. It actually happened when Domino's Pizza decided to open its first location in Italy. 7 years later, after opening a total of 29 stores across the country, this story ended not with a dramatic explosion, but with something far quieter. Their last remaining stores simply vanished from Italy's culinary landscape, with no announcement, no official statement of any kind. In this video, we're tracing Domino's journey in Italy. From big early optimism to a failure that ended so quietly, it almost felt like it had never happened at all. In October 2015, Domino's officially launched its operations in Italy under a 10-year franchising deal with local operator ePizza SPA. This was an extremely bold move. Some might even call it reckless. Italy isn't just any ordinary country when it comes to pizza. It's the country that historically invented the dish. Opening an American-style fast food pizza chain in pizza's own home country was a challenge that, on paper, looked nearly impossible to win. This boldness immediately sparked a strong backlash on Italian social media the moment the news first broke. Interestingly, Domino's itself appeared to recognize just how audacious this move was and actually leaned into that audacity openly. Their press release even used a fairly cheeky title, roughly translating to "Domino's Pizza in Italy? Oh yes, we did." To try to address this massive skepticism, Domino's attempted to localize its menu. Alessandro Lazzaroni, an Italian entrepreneur involved in this launch, explained that they built their recipes from the original pizza base, using Italian ingredients like tomato sauce, mozzarella, and prosciutto. This sounds like a fairly sensible approach, trying to honor local culinary tradition while still maintaining their fast food business model. But the problem was, the Domino's brand globally was actually far better known for American-style flavor mashups far from traditional, like cheeseburger pizza, for example. This created a fairly confusing contradiction in brand identity. On one hand, they were trying to appear respectful of Italian tradition, but on the other hand, their global reputation was actually built on flavor experiments that were extremely far from what Italians considered authentic. Even so, Domino's saw a fairly interesting opportunity in this market. Unlike most other countries, Italy at the time had no large-scale pizza delivery service. Based on this observation, they made a big bet on one key assumption: that convenience alone, the ease of ordering pizza and having it delivered straight home, could win over a country traditionally accustomed to enjoying pizza sitting down at a restaurant as part of a more relaxed social dining experience. This is a bet worth analyzing carefully. Domino's essentially assumed that a cultural habit rooted over decades, arguably even centuries, could be changed simply by offering a convenience option that hadn't previously been available. The big question was convenience alone powerful enough to overcome such deeply entrenched cultural tradition? By November 2019, Domino's confidence in their Italian strategy had grown so high that their co-founder and CEO, Alessandro Lazzaroni, announced an extremely ambitious target: 880 stores in Italy by 2030. To put this into perspective, this number would have far exceeded the scale of Domino's operations in the UK, which at the time had around 1,200 stores, a market that was already far more established and had already proven successful over many years. This is an extremely high level of optimism, considering that at the time this announcement was made, they had only been operating in Italy for about 4 years. Setting a target this ambitious showed enormous confidence in their growth trajectory, a confidence that, as we'll see, turned out to be extremely unrealistic. Just months after this ambitious target announcement, in December 2020 to be exact, Lazzaroni abruptly resigned from his position as CEO to go lead Burger King's Italian franchise instead. This is a fairly concerning signal. Picture this scenario: the very person who had just announced the most ambitious expansion vision in the company's history suddenly moved to a competitor in a different fast food category just months later. His departure left the company carrying a debt of 10.6 million euros, a financial legacy far from healthy. Domino's had actually hoped the COVID-19 pandemic would work in their favor. The logic was fairly reasonable. Traditional Italian restaurants typically didn't offer delivery, so when people were forced to stay home, Domino's should have had a natural advantage as one of the few delivery options available. But what happened was the exact opposite. Local pizzerias quickly adapted, adopting their own third-party delivery apps. Platforms like Deliveroo, Just Eat, and Glovo exploded in popularity during this period and captured the vast majority of a food delivery market whose demand had suddenly surged. This is a fairly ironic reversal. The competitive advantage Domino's had hoped for, being one of the only pizza delivery options, was quickly neutralized once local restaurants found their own way to offer similar service, complete with the authenticity reputation they had already built over years. In April 2021, ePizza, the local operator running Domino's franchise in Italy, sought court protection from its creditors after running out of cash and falling behind on debt payments. At the start of 2020, this company was only managing 23 corporate stores plus 6 more through a sub-franchise partner, a scale far, far from the 880 store target they had promised just months earlier. This gap between ambition and reality became clear proof of just how far off their growth projections had been. In April 2022, ePizza formally filed for bankruptcy, citing what they called unprecedented competition from local restaurants that had moved on to delivery apps during the pandemic. The company was given 90 days of creditor protection to try to recover. One last chance to turn things around before it truly came to an end. This protection period expired on July 1st, and by the end of that same July, all 11 remaining Domino's stores simply went dark. No announcement, no official statement of any kind. They just quietly disappeared from Italy's culinary landscape. This is a fairly striking way to end a business venture that had once been announced with so much boldness and confidence. No press conference, no official statement explaining what happened. Just silence. A sharp contrast to how this journey had begun 7 years earlier. The reaction from local Italians to this departure wasn't deep sadness, but more of a casual, indifferent shrug. One Bologna resident offered a comment that fairly perfectly summed up this sentiment, comparing it to a fairly funny yet sharp analogy, like themselves going to England and trying to make fish and chips, something they felt made no sense at all. This simple comment actually captures quite precisely the core of Domino's entire failure in Italy. Trying to sell a version of a traditional dish to the very country that invented that dish was something that felt fundamentally nonsensical to many locals from the very start. So, what's the big lesson we can take from Domino's 7-year, 29-store journey in Italy? Domino's did successfully identify a genuinely real market gap. Italy really didn't have a large-scale pizza delivery service when they entered, but they miscalculated two important things. First, how quickly local competitors could adapt and fill that same gap once a strong enough incentive appeared, as happened during the pandemic. Second, and perhaps more fundamentally, they misjudged whether convenience alone was powerful enough to overcome cultural preferences that ran so deep about how pizza was supposed to be enjoyed. The ambitious target of 880 stores they had once announced with so much confidence ultimately ended with just 29 stores across their entire history of operations there, before disappearing completely without a sound. This is a fairly stark reminder that a market gap that looks obvious on paper isn't necessarily a genuine need actually felt by local consumers, especially when you're competing against a cultural tradition that's centuries old. If you enjoy global business case studies like this, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss other case studies on global business successes and failures. See you in the next video.